Some of you have already been exposed to the Johari's window, and one of the questions that came out of the discussion in the forum has asked specifically about feedback and the value of that. I would like to explain to you the Johari's window. It's a thinking framework that I use to understand a lot of what I do as a coach. And it's a little model designed by two guys, Joe and Harry. And from there, the name, the Johari's window, where they explain certain things that are very important for us to understand as coaches. Is everybody still seeing the screen, Johari's window? Somebody, do you see Johari's window there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
So this is the gist of the Johari's window. It talks about fundamentally about knowledge. Knowledge is the substance of our thinking. Knowledge is the thing that we use to process. Our brains processes knowledge, and it's the main thing that we use to operate our brains with. And what the Johari's window says is there are things that you know about yourself, and there are things that you don't know about yourself. Now, I think we all can agree to that. There are, and depending on how old you are, and depending on how your levels of self-awareness is, there are things that you know about yourself. But there might still be things that you don't know about yourself. Now, we live in a world where we are connected. I know by making the cliche statement that everything is connected is not necessarily meaningful. Everything might be connected, but everything is not in synergy with one another, or everything is not meaningfully connected to one another. Even though it's a kind of a blanket statement, which I agree with, that everything is connected. So in terms of us living in a social context, we cannot distance ourselves from the social context in which we live. We live in families, we live in teams, we live at work amongst colleagues, we live at churches and wherever we fellowship with other fellow believers. So we stand in connection with other people. And because of that, other people know things about ourselves or about us. But they also don't know everything about us. Now, if you take the combination here of things that you know about yourself and other things that you don't know about yourself, things that other people know about us and things that they don't know about us, we get 4 different windows, so to speak, that Joe and Harry talk about. Now, the first window is the intersection between what you know about yourself and what other people know about you, things that are known to them. Now, Joe and Harry calls this the free area or the free space. It's an area where you are free to share whatever you are comfortable with sharing with others. You allow other people to see certain things about you, and you don't mind that people see those things about you and that they know those things about you. And then the second area of your life where you don't know about certain things but other people know about those things. Johari's window calls that the blind area of your life. We all have blind spots, things that we don't really know about ourselves, although it forms part of who we are. And for some of us, many things can reside in that area of our lives where we have blind spots. And then the third window that's possible are things that we know about ourselves, but other people don't know about those things. Joe and Harry, or the Johari's window, calls that the hidden area of your life. And then there's a third area where there's an intersection between things that you don't know about yourself, neither do other people know about that. It's called the unknown area of your life. So we get those 4 windows, and all 4 windows form part of who we are as people. It's the free area, the blind spots or blind area that we have, the hidden area, and the unknown areas of our lives. Now, the basic premise of the Johari's window says that the bigger the free area is of your life, the higher the quality of your life is. The more you experience a high quality of life, the more your relationships are healthy, the more you enjoy many things in life. Now, there are certain things that need to happen for us in order for those free areas to expand. And they usually expand either into the blind area, the hidden area, or the unknown areas of our lives. Now, for the blind area to be made less, in other words, for the free area to expand into the blind area, the way that happens is through feedback, that we get feedback from other people. Feedback is very, very important when it comes to coaching, and in general is very important for you as a person and me as a person to grow, that we can receive feedback. Now, it's also possible and it's also real that some of the feedback that we might receive in life is not really palatable. It's not something that we just embrace and say, oh, thank you very much for telling me. And in my case, someone once told me that I'm a lazy person. Now, for me, it wasn't easy to embrace it immediately. I did put it on the shelf, and my first response to when I heard that was, who the heck are you to tell me who do you think I am? So feedback that we might receive are not always palatable, but it always has the potential to help us grow as people, because it has the potential to lessen, to make smaller the blind area of my life. And that will automatically help me to grow as a person, because it will expand the free area of my life. So where or from whom are we willing to receive feedback? I think the people that we allow to speak to our lives are the people that we find we love and people that we respect. There is some kind of thing in us that we cannot just embrace any kind of feedback. But if we respect people, we think highly of them, we think most probably that they have something to say, and we regard what they have to say. From those people, we tend to receive feedback or allow feedback. The other kind of people that we allow feedback from, we could call friends. Often, if we've got good friendships, we allow those people to speak to our lives, to speak to our hearts. And when we hear them, specifically when they have something to say about us or give us feedback about ourselves, then the potential for growth is there. I think in general, feedback is a very important thing in our lives, to allow feedback into your life. In the coaching scenario, feedback often happens when I would reflect with a client on something that I might see. Now, there is a kind of a prerequisite before I start to allow a client, so to speak, in on what I see from the client. I need to have good relationship with that client. I need to have a solid relationship. Relationship is a very strong prerequisite for me as a person before I grant myself some kind of right to speak to the life of another person. If I don't have a relationship with you, chances are I might see things about your life, especially the blind areas of your life, but I would not remark on that. I would not give you the feedback. Feedback becomes meaningless if people don't embrace feedback. And since that is a kind of a reality for me, what I try to do is to develop a solid relationship with the people that I give feedback to. Now, for me, one of the things that resort kind of under the whole idea of feedback is accountability. I believe accountability is very important. It might not be important to you when you're not a child of God, but when you become a child of God, that is one of the things I believe that should become important to you. There need to be in the life of any person, and maybe if we break it down, specifically Christians, and if we break it down in this context, life coaches or people that are interested in developing other people, there need to be people that can speak into your life, people that can help you to see things that you might not be aware of. One of the questions that I got on the discussion forum comes from Helene van Heijsteen that asked about how can one grow in self-awareness as a coach? Now, I think it's a very good question, because self-awareness is a very, very important thing, to become aware of yourself. Self-awareness is also one of the elements of emotional intelligence. Let me just go down this rabbit hole of emotional intelligence briefly. When we think about emotional intelligence, we primarily, or this is what Daniel Goleman, who could be regarded as the father of emotional intelligence, he breaks it up into two categories. You get personal elements of emotional intelligence, and you get interpersonal elements of emotional intelligence. The personal elements of emotional intelligence refers to things within yourself as a person. And then interpersonal elements of emotional intelligence refers to things that happen between us in relationship. Now, the most critical element of the personal elements of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. It is an awareness of yourself. And maybe if I can just draw a distinction here for you between self-awareness and self-consciousness. The two are not the same when I refer to them or when I speak about them. Self-awareness is when you become aware of yourself in any moment in time. You might become aware of your emotional state, for instance, how you feel at any point in time, what you're thinking. It is, in essence, self-awareness could be described as thinking about your own thinking. It's a very important term or wording to understand when it comes to coaching, is to think about your own thinking. It's something that I try to create with my clients as well, that I ask questions in such a way that I sort of direct them and guide them into think about the way they think. Now, a basic premise underlying that is you cannot change things you don't think about. So what I would like to do for my clients is to help them think about the way they think. Because when they start to think about the way they think, they become self-aware. Now, self-awareness for me is a very high level of intelligence. It is when you become self-aware, you use your brain to process very high-level information. It is not just thinking on a level and straightforward thinking about some things, for instance. It is a kind of a stepping back and then looking at yourself and think about and look at how you think about things. Now, for me, self-awareness is a lifestyle. I've read about it 20 plus years ago when I read the book The Fifth Discipline, written by Peter Senge, where he talks about these levels that one can go into to become aware of what you think about and how you think about it. Now, when I give a client feedback by maybe asking a question because I see something in the client, that kind of feedback can help the client to think about what the client thinks about and also how the client thinks about that. And that will immediately, when the client can get a very a meaningful answer to the question that I would ask, that guides him to think about the way he does things, or think about the way he thinks about things, or think about the way he feels about things, then in that guidance, that coaching that I give my client, I make really kind of a new world available to my client. Because the moment my client starts to think about his own thinking, he can change that thinking if that thinking doesn't serve him, if that thinking doesn't help him to cope with certain things, if that thinking doesn't help him to live a life of high quality, for instance. Now, feedback is the thing, according to bringing it back to the Johari's window. Feedback is the thing that helps my client to become aware of his own thinking, to make himself aware, of which I say self-awareness is not the same as self-consciousness. Now, I draw that distinction to say, as much as self-awareness helps us to grow, self-consciousness might make us to draw back. It is a kind of an awareness. It's also an awareness, but it is a kind of awareness. Now I'm talking about self-consciousness. It's a kind of an awareness that could make you ashamed or afraid or guilty or not worthy enough. And that's not what I'm talking about. That is exactly not what you would like to create with your client. A kind of a self-consciousness and say, hey, I've caught you out. And now you should feel ashamed, or you should feel guilty about something. That's not where you want to go with a client. That's not where you want to go as a person. So the way in which one gives feedback in a coaching scenario, the way I do it, is often just to make a kind of a reflection on what I see with my client. And I can do it by just making a statement, or I can do it by just asking what I call a reflective question. And the reflective question always has the potential to help my client see something of herself that previously was not available for her to see, that previously laid within the blind area, the blind spot. It's very important that we see ourselves. It's very important that we become aware of ourselves. But as I say, not in a way that it makes you fearful or shameful or guilty, but in a way that you become aware of something about yourself. And it might, like I say, something that you realize is not serving you. It might be a way of thinking. It might be some things that you do. Now, if I can throw this in, for me, this is very similar to conviction of the Holy Spirit. Because conviction of the Holy Spirit is when the Holy Spirit reveals something to you about yourself, something that's not serving you, or something that's contaminating a great relationship with your Father, or a great relationship with yourself, or a great relationship with some other people. So conviction, self-awareness, reflection are things that, and bear with me here because I'm throwing out terminology tonight that will eventually fit within a nice framework as we progress. But conviction, self-awareness, and feedback reside sort of, for me, under the same umbrella. All those things serve as people to grow and to become, because that is the endeavor, that is the pursuit, is your process of becoming. And for me, it's very similar and synonymous with starting to walk in your own footsteps, if I can use the words of Gregory Boyle. Or your process of becoming is very much, in my case, you starting to discover, embrace, and celebrate your identity as a person. It's very important for you and I to become who we are created to be. It's the greatest life to live. There's no greater life to live but to live the life that has been intended for you to live by this great God that designed you and fashioned you and formed you even before you were born. So feedback is a very important thing. And sometimes feedback can be harsh and we don't embrace it immediately, but still, as I've said, it's got the potential to help us grow. But more often than not, when we do receive good feedback about ourselves, it can open our eyes and it can up the level of understanding of ourselves, because it will increase self-awareness. And by increasing self-awareness, the blind spot becomes smaller and the free area becomes bigger. The second thing, or the second area in which we can open up the free space of our lives, is to eat, so to speak, into the hidden area. It's to lessen the hidden areas in our lives. So what is the hidden area? As I've said, it's the area where you know things about yourself, other people don't know those things. Now, the Johari's windows say, it says that the way that we can make the hidden area smaller, in other case, increase the free area, is through self-disclosure. Self-disclosure is to reveal something about yourself to someone which was otherwise unknown to that person. Now, that doesn't happen unless we've got a solid, trusting relationship. We will not self-disclose, especially things in the hidden area, because you must understand that the hidden area are things known to ourselves about ourselves. It's not hidden to us. The blind area things are hidden, but the hidden area things are not hidden to us. Those are the things that we know about ourselves. Now, through self-disclosure, we share something about ourselves. We reveal something. Something that's very prominent to me, and it brought me often, when I engage with it, often it brought me some freedom, was the idea that I think by now I understand deeply that that which is kept in the dark will be ruled from the dark. Now, another phrase to explain that is to say that the power of sin lies in its secrecy. And it's very true. If you go and think about it, the power of sin, and especially when in the past I've worked with guys that have addictions of some sort, the things that are hidden are often the things that control them. But there is some kind of beautiful thing that happens to us when we self-disclose, when we bring that which is in the darkness, that which is hidden, when we bring it into the light, into the open. It releases something in us. It helps us to come into the open, and then we can start to work with that. Now again, you can think for yourself. We don't self-disclose just to anyone. But where there is a good, solid, trusting, congruent relationship between us and another person, it becomes much easier to self-disclose. Now, for you as a coach or someone that is in the industry of helping other people, you can realize by what I'm saying now how important it is that we build trusting relationships with our clients. And a trusting relationship is often, if not always, void of judgment and criticism and condemning other people. That is not a space in which you and I can move. We cannot move in a kind of mindset where we judge, condemn, and criticize other people, or our clients for that matter. We need to create some kind of atmosphere and relationship with others where they feel free to self-disclose, where they become comfortable to share things with us which they might not share with many other people or anyone else. I've often had, as a coach, the experience where people would come to a place and say, you know, I would like to share something with you that I've never shared with anyone else. I've never told anyone else this that I'm going to tell you now. Now, that makes me feel good as a coach, knowing that people are willing to self-disclose to that extent. Because I know when we bring it into the light, when we put it on the table, when we start to work with it, when we talk about it, there is some kind of freedom that comes. And when a person does that, I know that that person trusts me. That person feels comfortable with me. That person knows that they can share things with me without being judged or condemned or criticized. It's very important, and those of you who don't know me will hear these words often during the time we spend together. There's a kind of a posture that we should take in as coaches called unconditional positive regard. Those three words have the potential to revolutionize your life. Unconditional positive regard. It's a kind of an attitude, a kind of a posture that we have towards other people. That even though I have ethics for myself, even though I understand what right and wrong is, I don't superimpose that on other people. Rather than eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, I should choose as a child of God to eat of the tree of life. And there is a definite distinction between the two, and there is definite result from eating of the two. If you eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, too often we eat of that tree, but if you eat too much and you stand in the shade of that tree and eat too much from that tree, it will contaminate you in a bad way, not a good way. But if you eat of the tree of life, which for me is Christ himself, then life will come to me, and what I have I can give. I will be able to give life to others. Now, later in the year, we are going to talk about those two trees, the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. It's very important that we understand how fundamental that should become part of our thinking, that we should rather eat of the tree of life. From the beginning, God said, don't eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. I think he's still stuck there, and I'm glad he is, that we should rather eat of the tree of life. Now, when we eat of the tree of life, we can conduct relationships with people in a different way, a wonderful way, a good way, a healthy way, a way where we create a context for other people where they can really grow. So when I eat of the tree of life and people self-disclose to me, the last thing I do is to judge them, because I know I'm under the same grace as what they are. I need the same Jesus to save me as much as they need the same Jesus to save them. So self-disclosure, when it starts to happen in a coaching relationship, is a beautiful thing. And like I say, it has the potential to minimize the hidden area, and in that process helping people to become more free and open. And then the third element, according to the Johari's window, where the free area can be extended into the unknown area, is through revelation. Revelation is very important. There are things, if we go back to the little framework, things you don't know about yourself. Neither do other people know about that. But God knows about that. So things in this hidden or the unknown area of your life are not just things that you don't know your emotional response about things, or you don't know how you think about things, neither do other people know about that. It's also things about your destiny, things about your identity, things about your purpose. Many, many people I've met in life, and you can testify most probably about this as well. They just say, I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know why I'm on the planet. I don't know what I'm here to do. Now, when someone says that to me, I know that he talks about, or she talks about, the unknown, otherwise known as the mysterious area of their lives. But because it's unknown to us, to me or that person, it doesn't mean it's unknown to God. That's why, according to this little model, Johari says that revelation needs to be part of expanding our understanding of ourselves, our knowledge of ourselves. We need revelation. Now, let me briefly touch on my understanding of knowledge, or specifically the types of knowledge that our brains process. You get intellectual knowledge, you get experiential knowledge, and you get revelation knowledge. Now, later in the year, you'll see more videos on this, and we'll talk about this. But briefly for now, it's good to understand that those three types of knowledge is processed by your brain. Intellectual knowledge is pure, simple, academic, theoretical knowledge that we encounter or get to know. You know, and we can get it like in a teaching like this. Could just be intellectual knowledge. It's got some kind of potential to transform us, but not much. And then you get experiential knowledge. Experiential knowledge comes from intellectual knowledge. So you first gain intellectual knowledge, and when you start to experiment with it, work with it, practice it, implement it, then eventually that knowledge that was just theoretical and academical can become part of you, but in a deeper way, in a more significant way. Experiential knowledge starts to happen with us when we work with it, work with the knowledge that our minds gain through reading a book, listening to a lecture, watching a YouTube video, or whatever. And then a third level of knowledge. Let me do this. A third level of knowledge that I believe is the deepest kind of knowledge that our brains can process is revelation knowledge. And that knowledge is actually the combination of intellectual knowledge that transformed into experiential knowledge, and now in relationship with God, that experiential knowledge is coming alive to us. Now, I believe that unknown elements of our lives can be revealed to us by God. And that is how, and according to this little model as well, that is how the unknown part of us grows smaller and the free area grows larger into that area, is through revelation. Now, what one can gather from what I'm saying is actually, and this is kind of a golden thread that might run through it if you can see it, is how important relationship is. Relationship with Him, your Father, relationship with yourself, and relationship with other people. Any one of those dimensions of relationship is very important to you and I. We cannot go without relationship for our growth and becoming as people. So it's very important to understand how impactful it is for you and I to build relationships where people can blossom in our presence, where they can really grow and become who they are meant to be. Those relationships, as I've said, is void of judgment and condemnation. They are not void of challenge sometimes. Because when I have a good relationship with you and you know that I love you and I would challenge you, it will not break the relationship. There is a little thinking framework that I use to understand this. It comes from Stephen Covey that says that in all your relationships, you develop what he calls emotional bank accounts. So I've got an emotional bank account with every person that I have relationship with. And like any bank account, there are deposits and withdrawals. So with my clients, what I make sure of is to make more deposits than withdrawals. But there might sometime come that I make a withdrawal by maybe giving my client direct feedback that he might not want to hear, or asking a question in such a way that I reveal to him that I've actually seen something about his life, that if he were to grow out of that, he would become the person he was intended to be. So if you can, in all your relationship for that matter, balance your deposits and withdrawals, it will help a lot. Make more deposits than withdrawals. But sometimes, and I just want to sort of conclude with this idea, sometimes with our clients, and I would do this especially when I have a strong relationship with a client, And by grace, I think I tried to develop a strong relationship. By session 3, I would like to believe that my client can see I'm trustworthy, I'm reliable, he can share with me without being judged, etc. By session 3, the bridge built between me and my client, that bridge called relationship, becomes strong enough for me to venture over that bridge and to deposit some things into my client's life that might otherwise be impossible to deposit into his life without that strong bridge. Now, the idea of unconditional positive regard is not unconditional agreement with my client. I want you to understand this because it's important to draw this distinction, that even though I have unconditional positive regard for my client, unconditional meaning I do not set conditions. I do not ask you to behave in a certain way before I'm going to regard you. I will regard you irrespective, and I'll regard you in a positive way. And when you see that, it doesn't mean that I've got unconditional agreement with what you say and with what you do. Because as a coach, and you'll find it yourself in your own coaching, that one of the things that we need to balance is this unconditional positive regard with unconditional agreement, and saying that is not true for coaching, that I unconditionally have to agree with what my client does, what he thinks, and how he says things. I can still challenge my client, but the challenge will come based on the fact that my client knows that I accept him unconditionally, or that I regard him unconditionally. So it's a very important thing for you and I hear myself say a couple of things here, that we understand feedback and allow feedback for ourselves as well. Because in the process of self-awareness, that is also a kind of a feedback that you give yourself. While you sit with a client and you become aware of the way you think, that's a kind of a feedback that you allow for yourself. So feedback is important. Self-disclosure is important. Revelation is important. That can happen within a coaching relationship, that those things it is visible, it happens there, and it helps us to coach our clients, to make our clients self-aware. And then another thing that I believe is very important, as I've said earlier, is to understand that on a very subconscious level, in many ways, we develop accountability relationships with our clients. They sort of feel that they don't want to disappoint us in some way. It sounds a bit bizarre and weird, but it's true. Our clients don't want to disappoint us. They actually develop, especially if you're a coach that really love your clients, which I highly recommend, that your client doesn't want to disappoint you. But you should still help your client to bring things out in the open, to open the hidden area, or to open the blind spot for your client so that your client can grow. So I just want to leave you with those few concepts. You'll later on in the year see how these concepts actually work beautifully within the coaching context, in coaching sessions, especially when we get to using the tools later on in the year. That feedback, self-disclosure, and revelation, very important. Understanding that we have accountability relationships that develop subconsciously and very spontaneously with our clients, and that it's more important for you and I to eat of the tree of life than the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So those couple of concepts I want to leave with you tonight, just knowing that those things are very important for us when it comes to loving people. Now, to conclude, I've been thinking today, I see our time is over. I've been thinking about something that I would like to leave with you, more in the sense of a contemplation or a meditation. It's something that I heard Richard Rohr talk about, and it's something that I believe is very important for our becoming, and it's also something that if you think about it, it can it can grow kind of a life of its own in you as a child of God. What Richard did, he said, let me explain to you a deep relationship with God. And he didn't say that, but I believe that for us as Westerners, people that live in a Western context, this is quite important to do, but also not so easy to do. Now, what Richard did, he just took the scripture verse that says, be still and know that I am God. And he broke it down the following way. He said, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be. If you think about this idea, this beautiful truth for this week, starting with be still and know that I'm God, and you can bring it back to just be. And in your contemplation and meditation, you do it in a meaningful way, and God is with you. God is with us. God is, He will never leave us nor forsake us. He's into the way we think. He's into our meditations. He's into our contemplations. He's into when we read the scriptures to understand Him. He's into the prayers that we pray to Him and the chats that we have with Him. He's into your fasting. He's into every step you take. He's even into knowing how much hair you've got on your head. So when He's in to us understanding what it means to be still and know that He is God, really, to be still and know that He is God, up until you know what it is to be, because you are in Him, there's some kind of freedom that comes, some kind of understanding Him in a different way that's liberating, because that's why Jesus Christ came to earth, to set us free. It was for freedom's sake that He came to set us free. So I would like to leave you with these thoughts tonight. I know I've jumped the gun a bit by going into the Johari's window, but I thought I would just like to touch on certain concepts that will be very important for you to grow as a coach or a people helper of some sort. For next week, I'm again in our discussions going to paste a discussion where you can post any questions that you would like me to answer. We will spend some time to answer those questions, and those questions guide me to share with you things that you would like to know more about. So enjoy watching your videos this week, and we will touch base next week. And in the meantime, the WhatsApp group will be alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico.
Dank je, Nico. Thank you, Nico.
Dank u, Nico. Dat is klap.
Great
Dank jullie
pleasure.
allemaal. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nico.
Thank you, Nico. Thank you very much. Bye.
Nico.
Bye, dankie.
Bye allemaal.
Dank je, Nico.
See.
Equal potential.